All right, welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. And former 100-meter world record holder Asafa Powell recently set tongues wagging after proudly declaring on his YouTube channel, The Powells, that he will not allow his children to represent Jamaica if the support system doesn't improve. Powell, who represented the black, green and gold at 4 Olympic Games, winning sprint relay gold in 2016, says he is patriotic, but business is business.
So whenever I post videos or anything of the boys doing sports or track, people are always like, yo, just our future look good and all that stuff, future stars and all that. But honestly, guys, if the support system don't change, my kid's not running for Jamaica. Not running for Jamaica. Sorry to say that, you know what I mean, but it's just facts, you know what I mean? My wife is Canadian and Ghanaian, so there are options, you know what I mean? I remember back in 2006, I was offered millions of US dollars to run for another country. And at the time, I turned it down because I didn't know, it was very early, so I didn't know what the future would. If I knew what I know now, I would have taken up that opportunity.
All right, joining us on Zoom now is SportsMax.tv editor Leighton Levy. All right, so Leighton is actually joining us on the phone this afternoon. And Leighton, we're so happy to have you. In an opinion piece available now on SportsMax.tv, you argue that much like Schrodinger's famous cat, both alive and dead at once, Asafa Powell is simultaneously right and wrong. So I'm going to start this discussion by asking you to expound on that a bit for me.
All right, so let's start with what he said. What he said is true. Right, there is no the central point of his argument is true. Jamaica does not have a proper structured support system for its athletes, regardless of the sport. Right. So what I'm saying is this: when you look, well, let me just eliminate one thing first. When he says that a country offered him millions of US dollars to run for them, that was in 2006. He said when he won the Commonwealth Games, barely won the Commonwealth Games back in Australia. I think that was back in the day. The thing is that Jamaica will never be able to do that, right? The first point I made in the column was that in Asafa's heyday, between 2004 and 2012, Jamaica's GDP went from about 52% to 143%. Jamaica couldn't afford to pay its athletes millions of dollars to run for the country. We've never been able to do that because I don't think Jamaica has the resources to be able to do that. The point that he makes, though, about support, for me, there needs to be structured support around the athletes from their emerging, because we can see clearly from early on which are the athletes who are likely to make that jump from high school to amateur to professional. But however, not all of them will attract sponsors like an Adidas. I mean, Puma signed Usain Bolt when he was 16 years old. There are not very many Usain Bolts, around in track and field. Of course, a number of athletes over the years have signed contracts. But what about those who do not have contracts? What about those who come from less fortunate backgrounds? What is the system? How does the system help them to progress to a level where perhaps they could become the next big star? That's what I think is the central point of his argument, and which I agree with. Where I think he is wrong is that he, like others like him, because there are a number of celebrated big-name athletes in Jamaica who carry a lot of power with their platforms and with their names, and all they do is talk. They do not coalesce behind an idea and then use that influence to change things the way they currently are. That was the basic concept of the column that I wrote, because I think a lot of people are emotional about what Asafa said because they're speaking from a position of emotion and not understanding what the basic behind it is. There is no proper structure. Right now, Jamaica has a system where athletes get a stipend each month, those who are likely to make an Olympic or World Championship team. And they get a stipend, and of course there is health insurance, which is a big step for me in terms of helping those athletes. But when it comes to the athletes who are from, look, there are some athletes out there who sleep on the ground and who don't have a proper meal and who don't have any kind of support around them until by chance someday they can probably make it. We need to reduce that up, reduce the likelihood of it being chance and make it more likely through our structure that we help them to move forward and perhaps get a scholarship to university and, of course, you know, eventually transition into the professional ranks.
Yeah.
One of the key things, however, for that to change is for us to dismiss this ridiculous idea that every single athlete who shows talent has to stay in Jamaica to train, because there's this perception that was recently espoused by Usain Bolt that U.S. colleges burn out athletes. My argument has always been the athletes have been burnt out from their here in Jamaica, because I've spoken to a number of athletes who have gone to college who tell me that the training at high school here in Jamaica is much tougher than the one that they experience at college. So there's a lot to be discussed, and there's a lot. The column only touches a part of it because there are a lot of other elements that are involved, but that was the basic essence of what I was trying to communicate.
You know, Leighton, I probably would have agreed with you up until yesterday. But yesterday on the show, we actually, in our interactive segment, spoke about St. Lucia and what the government there now will be doing for J.D. Emmanuel, right? And then Ricardo made a massive point in that interactive segment saying, you know, there's one country that would be unable to do that, and it's Jamaica. And the point he was making is where I want to go. There are so many athletes, Leighton, and so limited resources that, you know, some of the stuff that you said just now, and of course you'll get the opportunity to counter what I'm saying, might come across as impossible with the amount of athletes that are available and different sports in Jamaica.
No, well, for Asafa, I was speaking specifically about track and field.
Okay.
So let's keep it there. Here's the thing, though. And I hear Ricardo's point, and there are many people who make that point about the large number of athletes who are involved in track and field who could possibly make it. But in every single sport, in every single country, in every part of the planet, not every athlete has access to the nature of support that they need, because that's the nature of life. Some of them will fall by the wayside. However, there is a large, we can actually help a larger number of athletes to make that progression. We can, look, track and field, by the sheer numbers, the economies of scale does not allow you to support every athlete. But then not every athlete has the potential to become a global star. Therefore, that eliminates a vast number of those athletes. So we're talking about the athletes who are, just like now, where there's a system in place where a number of athletes make, you know, qualify for a stipend from the government. I think is an agreement between the government and the J3s, where they get a monthly stipend, which is not even clearly enough. I've spoken to a number of athletes about that as well. It doesn't cover much. I mean, you have to pay coaches, masseuse, nutrition, all kind of different elements. It's never going to be enough. What I'm saying to you is that if we put structures in place, and let's just broaden that, for example, for this moment, to other sports, because it's not just isolated to track and field. But since we're talking about track and field, if we put the necessary structures in place, it can happen. Let me explain something. One of the things that we always tend to overlook. This country has, J3 has signed a number of contracts with shoe companies, from whatever it is, from Reebok to come through now to Puma. What if there is part of that contract where, because we have the power to, especially in the Usain Bolt era, where we had leverage to negotiate better contract deals, to say, okay, a portion of that contract, the money from that contract goes towards a development fund. And in conjunction with the SDF, in conjunction with private sector, we create a fund, a recurring fund, that we can invest it in something that turns over on an annual basis, and then over time that money goes, that money is shared among the athletes who are likely to progress to the national program to represent Jamaica, right? It is possible. So the argument that Ricardo makes is sound, but the argument that I'm making is that we're not going to support all of the athletes, but we can support more than the ones that are being supported now, and we can support them better than they're currently supported.
Boy, Leighton, I don't even know where to start with this conversation because, you know, the truth is I feel as if this is so wide-ranging. And, you know, you pointed out what you think is Asafa Powell's central point. I must admit, having listened to the piece, having watched the piece, that I'm not 100% sure what his central point is, but if that's what you got from it, I completely take that. I did have some issues, but let's deal with what you consider to be the central point, Leighton, because I'm still struggling a little bit. There is so much I want to say on this issue, and you know, you pointed to some of it, Leighton. The fact is, there is some level of assistance that is given to our athletes from the government standpoint. The insurance scheme is tremendous, and that's not just for track and field athletes. That is for all national representatives, and it is absolutely tremendous. Specific to track and field athletes, though, and I've spoken about this on this show, where I feel the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association should do a better job, a much better job of essentially formalizing the support that they say they consistently give to athletes. So there is that. But I get the impression, Leighton, and this is where I think you just cannot, you know, hide from it. And I listen to Asafa, and when he's going to say things like, well, athletes shouldn't have to work 9-to-5 jobs after they retire, and you know, athletes are not like the normal people. Athletes, I mean, people will try to level up, but you can't level up to the athletes. Leighton, you have to admit that that comes across a little entitled, and I'm sure you can understand why a lot of Jamaicans would take offense to that type of reasoning in a country where there are so many issues that need to be taken care of, especially from a governmental standpoint. And then to hear one of your heroes essentially speak in that manner has to be disappointing.
Look, I'm not going to be caught up in the emotional side of it, Ricardo. Here's how I respond to that. Sports careers are short, okay? Very short. So if you represent your country, for example, and because there are a number of Jamaican athletes who are on our Olympic teams, that are on our World Championship teams, that are on our Commonwealth Games teams, that are consistently there, but they've never been able to attract a shoe sponsor, for example, to help them to float above the rest. Huh? They're ambassadors for this country. And whether we like it or not, their images, their representation brings value to Jamaica. If you should quantify that, you can't, because the value of it, let me just put something, let me put a figure on it. When Usain Bolt won the World Championship in 2009, Ricardo.
Yeah, but hold on, Leighton, because we've admitted that we're not talking about the Usain Bolts, and we're not talking about the Shelley and Fraser Prices, and maybe we're not even talking about the Asafa Powells.
Allow me to make this point, Ricardo. When Usain Bolt won in 2009, his media market value, right, was estimated at $389 million US. Jamaican government does not spend that in 10 years on their tourism budget. So what I'm saying to you is that when you put on the national colors and go out there to represent at the highest level, Ricardo, you are part of that brand, and that brand is valued as something. So if your career ends because of a knee injury or whatever, or even just time, are you telling me that that is not worth something? Are you telling me then that athletes has to then go and fend for themselves after they represent the country?
Nobody is saying it's not worth something, Leighton, but the question is, what is it worth?
No. What is it worth, Ricardo? We can't quantify that. One of the things is this. What I'm saying is that just like when Donovan was on last week, and we said that if there's a fund created, something similar to like an insurance investment fund or something, that an athlete can use that as collateral to start a business, use it as maybe take a loan on it and build a house or something. Give them something back in return. I'm not saying you must fund them for the rest of their lives, but I'm saying give them the opportunity to be able to do that. And many athletes out there, look at what's his name, Ray, you ran for Jamaica in the 1960s, right? He died a pauper. He went to the Olympics, Ricardo, and represented Jamaica. People still talk about him today, not just Jamaicans, but globally. Are you telling me that that's not worth something? Are you telling me that when you go to the Olympics and wear a national color and win a medal for your country, even if you don't win a medal, then if that athlete does not live up to our expectations, then we just allow them to just run off into the wilderness. We are the same ones who encourage them not to go to school and tell them that we can go and make some money and then do whatever they want to do afterwards.
When you say we are the same ones who encourage them not to go to school, be careful there.
No. When we say we, I mean, I'm talking about Jamaicans in general.
I don't know that that is true, though, Leighton, that Jamaicans in general encourage athletes not to go to school.
I had a conversation on a couple of radio shows a few years ago about athletes deciding to forego school to go pro and, take on the world. And then,
but that's not a position from the powers that be, either the government or the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association. I've never heard that coming from either of them, and they're the ones that we're suggesting here should do more.
Ricardo, who do these athletes represent?
They represent themselves, and by extension, they also represent the country.
They represent the country. When they put on the national, when they go to the meets, they represent themselves. When they put on the national colors, Ricardo, they represent the country. And as such, I think structure should be put in place to allow them to have a decent life after track, to have a decent life, to be able to just live like a normal person can live. Because as I said before, track and field careers are short. Some of them are shorter than others. Not very many do the Shelley and Fraser Price that do 17 years, or an Asafa that does 12, or Usain Bolt that does 10 or 11. I'm talking about the guys who are not able to earn from their contracts because the shoe contract companies don't see them as being representative enough. But they're on relay teams, they're on national squads, they're jumping and they're making finals, they're making semifinals, and we are the ones who are rooting for them. We should at least give them the opportunity to live like decent human beings when their careers are over. Yes, Jamaica is not going to be afford the millions of dollars that Bahrain and Turkey and all these countries pay, like a Jake Harvey to come and, of course, Andrew Fisher to represent them. No. The fact is that, though, while they're representing our country, Ricardo, as Donovan said, it's like you're in the military, you're an ambassador for your country, and that carries a value. And that value, yes, we're not going to be able to live up to that maximum value, whatever it is, but we should be able to put structures in place to allow these athletes that when they retire or their careers end by injury or other unforeseen circumstances, that they should be able to have access to resources that will allow them to live normal lives for the rest of their lives, right? Because it's not like the government's going to pay them $1 million a year until they die, but give them an opportunity to access resources that will then, as Donovan mentioned last week, to buy a house that gives you equity, that you can use that house as equity and get a loan, start a business, do something else than just waste away because your career is now over. Yeah, right? We're not saying that government will just throw money at them ad nauseum and whatever sticks. But there has to be structure done over that, Ricardo, that when they end their careers, they should be able to live in dignity.
Yeah, Leighton, I think we've just started to have the conversation, and you said that you're not saying that we should just throw money at the athletes, but a lot of individuals are thinking and are saying that. And when one of your heroes comes out and says, well, I ran for free all of my life. I have never gotten anything from Jamaica. I ran for free and I regret running for Jamaica because I should have taken the money. Then that doesn't look good, Leighton. And I hear you don't want to get into the emotional aspect of it, but an aspect of this is emotional and you cannot get away from that. Anyhow, we're out of time, Leighton, and I suspect that we're going to continue this discussion tomorrow and maybe even throughout the course of the week, because there is still so much more to be said on this issue, and I don't want what I've said today to be misconstrued to mean that I don't think that more can be done for the athletes, because I've been on this show many times saying that I think more can be done and that whatever is being done needs to be formalized to give the individuals an opportunity and everyone an opportunity to understand how it is being done and how they can access these benefits, both coming from the government side, and clearly there's a better understanding now of how to access the benefits coming from the government side, but also how to access the benefits coming from the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association. And I guess if you speak specifically to other sports, if there are benefits from those as well, how the athletes can access those. But Leighton will pick up on this conversation. Still so much more to discuss on this matter. Take care.
Absolutely. Ricardo, take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your guys' evening, guys. Bye-bye, Mariah, Lance.
Bye, Leighton.
All right. Lance and Mariah. This one will evoke a lot of emotion. And I hear what Leighton says about not getting too emotional, but I don't know how you don't get emotional about an issue like this. I think it's hard not to, or maybe I'm an emotional being, but I don't know.
Maybe you are up on a break.